everybody. Welcome to season 6. I am so excited about the conversations that are ahead. There are going to be some really incredible topics that we're going to talk about. And like most seasons, as the guest and the topics and the ideas were coming together, there are a few ideas that sort of emerge as sort of an overarching idea. And I think this season, as I was preparing for these conversations, there was something that happened in my own life. There was actually an unexpected experience that took place that shaped maybe the way I was thinking about the conversation, but even more than that, it frankly shaped the way that I'm looking at my own life. It shifted a perspective in me that I wasn't really ready for. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you because I think it has a lot to do with us looking at where we are and the signs of the times and all the things, not just as a human, but as a parent and as grandparents. And so if you'll just stay with me here for a minute, let me share this experience. So earlier this fall, I was preparing to go speak at a conference out in California for a homeschool event. Okay, so this event was not the typical homeschool event that you might be thinking of. In other words, there are a couple of huge organizations that put on great events across the country. You probably know of them if you're in that world. That's not what this was. This also wasn't a homeschool event that was put on by the state, like it will be the Florida Association of Homeschoolers or the Texas. It's not that. This was a new organization, and I've come to get to know the founder of the organization. So it's more an organization that helps families who are thinking about homeschooling or starting the homeschooling journey into that process. So that's what this conference was about. Super excited about it. In addition, those who would be attending were not the typical homeschool family. They weren't part of the homeschool movement. Some of them may have attended out of curiosity. But again, these were families. The audience there were people who were investigating what are some other options? What are the things that are going on? How can I get attached? The audience was to be about 2,000 people. There were speakers from all over the country. So this was a big event that was about to take place. Okay, a lot of us think about homeschooling, and when we think about homeschooling, we think, this is a Christian community. That's not what this was either. Not everybody was going to be Christians. Many of them were, but not all. Not all speakers were going to be Christians. And so I was really, frankly, very excited about participating and entering into this space and with this group of people because I was going to be able to sort of shed light on what true traditional education is versus or what we think about education versus what the definition of education is, and really why I think it's important to think about it from a biblical worldview. So it was a great opportunity for me, great opportunity for the families. Okay, put that aside. Prepping for that early fall. In addition, at this same time, the side note over here is I was watching legislation that was unfolding in California. And I know if you've listened to me in any shape, form, or fashion, you know that I do this a lot. Why? Because California is where all the wild things start. It is literally the wild, wild west when it comes to family legislation, education, parental rights. California is just sort of think about it as a place where a lot of things are tested. And so when you think about that, what starts in California does not stay in California. And so I keep an eye on California because I can see sort of what's coming in other parts of the country. There was a lot of legislation on the table early this fall that was going to be voted on that was not good for families. It was not, in fact, horrible. I'll go there. It was terrible for families. It was terrible for parental rights. It was terrible for children. So I had my eye on it. I understand model legislation at this point. Once something passes in one state, good or bad, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, I'm just talking about the process. But once something passes, it makes it far easier for those same laws to make their way into other states and get passed because a precedent has been set. So I see all of this happening. I'm watching. I have a lot of friends out there. And I also realize that as I'm prepping for this event that I'm going to, a lot of the audience will be voting on this or this law or legislation. If it goes through, a lot of this audience is going to be living it. They're going to be experiencing it. And this is going to be real in their life. For me, it's more things to come. For you, maybe more things to come. But this is tangible with this audience. And so in some way, I was just prepping for the audience that was going to be in front of me and understanding what it is that they're facing and why they might be choosing to look at different options. Here's the story. It's a Friday afternoon. Now, this legislation, 3 or 4 bills that I've been watching, this is now they're all on the governor's desk. It's going to be either vetoed by the Monday after this Friday that we're on. It's going to be either vetoed, it will be signed into law, or if it's not signed into law or vetoed, it will just fall into law. It will naturally fall into law on Monday. On that Friday, while I'm watching all this happen, I get a phone call from the founder of the organization that I will be speaking at this whole conference, the founder of the organization. And she said, "Hey, Suzanne, I needed to call you and let you know that this event that's been planned for a year with people from all over the country showing up, this event, I think it was going to happen in about 6 weeks, has been postponed due to death threats. These are credible death threats. There's been one on my life, one on one of the speakers' lives, and if I'm not mistaken, one on one of the children, that speaker's child. So this is in front of me, and I think to myself, what is happening? Where are we? My heart is broken, honestly, for her. I've put conferences on myself. I know what that's like. I know when you gather, it's a big deal to cancel a conference. A really big deal to cancel a conference because of a death threat. And so my heart is sort of breaking for her. It's breaking for the families who are excited and want to come learn. I'm just sort of bummed. It was a great opportunity for me, but things happen and you pivot. And so we hung up the phone and thought, bummer, let's move on to the next thing. We'll wait. We'll see if it's postponed. I'll go then. Well, then something unexpected really did happen with me. That evening, I found myself in tears. I started to cry. I didn't know why I was crying. I cried all night. I woke up in the middle of the night very teary. I mean, I'm not boohooing, but I'm really teary. Woke up in the middle of the night teary, started to sort of pray, could not stop the tears. They were just flowing. I got up out of bed. I'm like, Lord, what in the world am I crying about? I got that next morning, I had an event at our church that I was involved in, needed to be prepared for that, couldn't stop the tears. And as I reflected and the tears just continued to flow, I think what I realized in that moment was that the chaos and the danger and culture that so many are talking about had become far more tangible for me. They were personal. This was a personal touch with what was going on culturally in the world that we're living in. Okay, I realized that the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I've devoted the last 20, 25 years of my life to, they were under attack. The things that I get up and move forward every day, God willing, those things really were the things that were threatened with death. And let me just break down. I have a little list here of some things that I'm really passionate about and I've been passionate about for 20 years. I think they'll resonate with you. So let me just show you what I mean. Okay, I'm passionate about parents being intentional about raising their kids and gathering to learn from those who've gone before them. I'm passionate about parents being discipled, which is what these parents were going to do. Super passionate. Passionate about parents who are choosing a path that is best for their family, that they're not looking to the right or the left, but they're praying and asking the Lord, what's best for our family and how do we discern that? And then making that choice. I'm passionate about freedom of choice. Do you know why I'm passionate about freedom of choice? I'm passionate about freedom of choice because God gives it to us. God gives us choice. God gives us the freedom to choose. It's not the government. It's not our church. It's not a school. God gives us the freedom to choose. We were going to be talking about that at this conference. I'm passionate about parents choosing settings for learning, not just that fit their whole family, but that fit their individual children. Our children are going to have individual lives. And so not all children learn the same way. They just don't. My 3 children don't learn the same way. And so for a parent to be able to choose to know their child and to, I always say, be a student of your students. How do they learn? How do they best learn? For a parent to be able to do that and then go learn how to make those decisions, passionate about that. Lastly, I'm passionate about parents learning how to lead their families with the biblical worldview. a lot of parents haven't been taught through the lens of a biblical worldview, and they're hungry and thirsty to learn. A lot of parents want to know, listen, I have a biblical worldview, but how do I pass that on? How do I find curriculum and content and resources to do that? Passionate about that. So all of those things that I'm passionate about are about to be poured out at this event, and there are others who are passionate, and then what is it met with? It's met with a threat of death. I was facing this moment of what are we doing and what is my response going to be to the moment? Okay, so let's remember now, the Charlie Kirk tragedy has just taken place. And so this idea like it'll never happen, that's off the table now, right? These were credible. Authorities were involved. A lot of authorities were involved. This was not just a quick call. This was tangible. I've helped friends run for office. I know when people get those, like the death threats, I guess any death threat is important, but where people aren't engaged, that's not what this was. And so I'm thinking about this, like, okay, this is where society is. Scary enough. This is where society is. And now it's personal. And so then let me back up just a minute. Leading up to this phone call, when she called and told me that it had been canceled, there had been a phone call previous to this, and so I knew this was on the table. But here's what that phone call was. Hey, Suzanne, I need to make you and all the speakers and all the audience, all the people who are going to be coming, aware of this. There has been a threat. So at this point, when the phone call first came, it was, there's a threat out there, but we're moving forward. We're working with the facility. We're working with the authorities. We're going to figure this out. We want to keep moving. But here was the ask. The ask was this. If we move forward, do you want to be a part of this? Again, credible threats. Do you want to be a part of this? So before I got the no, I was faced with making a personal decision about what I believed and what I'd be a part. Not only that, I had someone on my team who has a 1-year-old, a young mama who is going to be traveling with me, who also needed to make a decision. Are we going to do this? Okay, remember, this is maybe a week after the Charlie Kirk tragedy. So we're looking at this thinking, gosh, what is happening? I prayed about it. I took it to my husband. We prayed together. We prayed independently. And I came to the conclusion it was a yes for me. I was going to go, even if the threat was on the table, trusting that security would be in place. And then I called Natalia with her 1-year-old and said, hey, this is what's going on. How do you feel? I can do this without you. Do you want to move forward? And her initial reaction was, yes, I feel fine with this. But you know, I didn't want her to move forward without praying with her husband. And she did. I said, you really need to take 24 hours. You need to have a conversation with your husband. This is not a joke. Like, let's do that. And she called back and she said, no, I feel like we need to move forward. I know we do. I'm one of those parents. I need to be equipped. I need to be informed. And we can't just stop doing what God's called us to. But I tell you this because before they gave us a no, that this was going to end, we had to give our yes. And in giving our yes, we had to face something that potentially could be a problem and that we had not given thought of before. Okay, so all of that's finished. It's a no, but I'm left with my tears. So I'm going to bring you fast forward back up to the tears and trying to figure out what in the world, why. I mean, this went on for a few days. I wasn't sitting around bawling, but I was emotional. And think about it almost like, you know, when you read in the Bible about travailing, I felt like God was borrowing my body to cry. It didn't feel personal. And finally, I started to think it's all connecting for me. All the stuff that I study, all the stuff that I watch, all these conversations that I have, it was just starting to connect internally before it really connected, cognitively. And here's what was coming to the surface. Last summer, I watched as a bill went through again in California. I live in Atlanta, by the way. I'm not obsessed with California. I just know that we have to keep our eyes on it. But a bill had gone through in California where there was more legislation to bring more vaccines into mandates. So there are already mandates in California to go to school, but there were vaccines that were being added. Now, hear me. If you're about vaccines and you want to do vaccines, I'm all for it. You know why? Because I believe that you have the choice. And I believe as parents, you should have the choice for your children. However, if you're not for vaccines and you don't want to vaccinate your children, I'm all for it. Why? Because I'm for choice, because God gives us choice. And if you don't want to move in that direction, to have more added to the mandates, I was like, good night. And I want to just note here, this is not just for public school. This is for public school or private school. This is for school, period, right? So if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that there are some medical exemptions. Don't quote me on all the details of the legislation. I'm giving you like the overview here. If I'm not mistaken, that there are still some exemptions that can happen that are medical. They're hard to get. However, the religious exemptions or the beliefs, exemptions based on your beliefs, those are not on the table. So imagine being a parent who's saying, I'm not for this, but I want my kids to go. So that's happening, and it's becoming stronger. I also was aware of a bill in California that did not make it through to the governor's desk. It was a bill that had to do with sort of clamping down on charter schools, on some non-traditional settings. And in California, a lot of people who are doing non-traditional education will go through the charter schools. It's sort of one of the ways that they homeschool. And so there was a bill up to clamp down on that they fought really, 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 really hard for. And they won on that. It did not go through, but it will come back. So I'm watching the mandates. I'm watching the clamp. This goes through. In addition to that, I'm getting phone calls about a conference that's going to help people step out and do their things, step out of these systems, and actually be creative and innovative for their own families, the things that I'm passionate about. That's getting shut down because of death threats. And then on that Monday, all the legislation that I had been watching, all of it got signed through. It didn't just fall into place. It was signed into law. And so I'm realizing as the tears are falling, I'm just looking at all of it together. Like the mandates are getting stronger, the options are getting lower, the pressure is getting tighter, and I know what happens. What starts in California doesn't stay in California. And I just think I was weepy. So all of that, as we continue to go, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. And in fact, I'm going to tell you that I'm not doom and gloom right now. I'm not at all. Because while all this is happening, I'm also watching what's happening in California with the parents, with the churches, right? There is a network in the state of California, all up and down the coast, of people who are connecting and working together. Parents are engaged in ways and involved and being innovative. Churches are engaged and involved in ways that most of us can only dream of. There are pastors that are stepping up, that are calling their congregations to action. In fact, there's one pretty well-known pastor who has a large congregation out there. And in the midst of this one bill that was going to pass, that was super dangerous, they did make a couple of tweaks to it. It's still horrific. But over in August, he literally stood in front of his congregation, a large congregation, and said this: if this bill passes, you need to take your family and leave the state. It's that dangerous for your family. I mean, that's a bold statement, but to say it to your congregation, right? Like, church, you need to leave. That was stated. In addition to that, he said, on this date, we will be meeting at the Capitol, and I want everybody in the congregation to figure out how to take the day off, take a sick day, take a personal day, get to the Capitol. We need to engage and be involved for the sake of the children. It was so unbelievably powerful. That's a win. There is a pastor in California who is running for governor right now because of his faith, because of his biblical worldview, because he knows there are things that are happening that are harming. And so this isn't a doom and gloom. It's not a doom and gloom. There's so many wins happening. What the enemy meant for harm, God is using for good. So here's the question I really want to ask. Will we wait for the intensity of this pressure that they're feeling in California and in some other states? Are we all going to wait for that intensity to hit our doorstep before we rise up and stand on what we believe? Is that what we're doing? Because the pressure's on there and movement is happening. But I'm asking this question: are we going to play defense? Or are we going to play offense, church? What are we going to do? Are we going to wait till it knocks on our door? And the question that started to bubble up, am I going to wait until this impacts me personally? Because I'm a ways away from that, quite frankly, where I live, I think, right? Am I going to wait until it hits my kids? Am I going to wait until it hits my grandkids? Is that what we're doing? Or are we going to step back and see the signs of the time? Are we going to look at what's happening culturally and say, that doesn't line up with what we believe? That doesn't line up with the biblical worldview. And when we do that, I'm asking, will we go on the offense as the church for the sake of the next generation? Will we be the ones that say, it's not coming to my doorstep? I think it's a question that we have to ask. And when we ask it, here's what I'm going to share with you on a personal note. I ask you a question, but I'm going to give a personal confession. I was facing this question and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it. As I was praying and I was journaling through my tears and saying, Lord, what is all of this about? What is the weeping about? I had a little whisper from the Lord, and this is what it was. He's like, hey, Suzanne, you've done a lot of hard things on behalf of your children and your grandchildren. You've started schools when you didn't know what you were doing, right? I did. I had no idea. I didn't even like school. Started schools. That's hard. You did that for your children on behalf of your children, and you invited people to come along. Right? You have made decisions that are counterculture that your friends didn't understand, that you've been misunderstood, very difficult, didn't defend, just made the decisions. You've done it. Maybe this is the most difficult. You have made decisions that disappointed your children because you trusted me, because you were following me and not them. Hard to disappoint your kids, right? Hard for them to go through hard things. You have shown up at the state capitol when you have no clue. I've told y'all before, it's like read Schoolhouse Rock and go. No idea what I'm talking about or doing. No idea. But there's legislation going in that's going to harm my children or harm somebody else's children. I'm going to go give it a go. I'm going to go give it a go. So God is sort of whispering to me, you've done these things, and that's great. You've been obedient. I've called you to do them. You've been obedient. Good job. But then he's whispered, that's not what this is. That's not what this is. We're not in that season anymore. I'm calling you to a generation. And I'm calling you to a generation of my children, not your children. They're my children. And when you fight for a generation, your children and your grandchildren will be covered because they're mine. And I started to realize that the tears that I was crying, the tears that I'm sure our Father in heaven is crying as he looks at what is happening to our children, there is a war on children. It's nothing new. It's nothing new under the sun, right? There's nothing new under the sun. But there's a war on our children, and I was being called to go beyond what was impacting just me and my family and to look at what was unfolding for children across our nation and really across the world. I started to realize that I think I was crying the tears that probably the parents in California were crying. A couple of them. There's the parent in California who knows what's going on. They're at the Capitol. They're fighting. They're running for the school board. They are fighting mandates. They're doing all the things. And I think my heart was probably just heavy because they're fighting so hard. And some of it didn't, some of the fight just looked like defeat. I know it's not in the long run, but that's what it probably felt like. And I think I was maybe just weary on their behalf. But I think the tears came from a deeper place. I think the tears really were for the parents that don't know what's going on. The parents that do not know what's happening in the schools and how their children are being impacted. The children that are the parents of the children that, I'm going to start again. The parents who do not know what's happening online. They have no idea. They think, like I would, frankly. I don't even know how to do most of technology. But who will search a little bit and go, oh, I think this is good. And they have no idea what's behind the scenes on this social media. They think they've done their due diligence. I think I was crying for the parents who don't even know to look at legislation. That would have been me. My kids were all out of the house before I ever looked at a bill or considered what legislation might do to impact my family. And it's not that the bill is impacting so much my child right in that moment, but it impacts what I have the right to do with my own children and how I can raise my children. I think I was crying for the parents who are working 2 jobs, who do not have the time to fight this nonsense at every turn. They're just trying to make ends meet. I think I might have been crying For the parent who's the single parent who is doing all the work to get through the end of the day and wouldn't even know where to look because there's no time left at the end of the day. I think I might have been crying. For the parent who looks at the options that they think other parents have that they don't have, that would say, you know what? I don't have any other options for education, which is not true. It's so not true. But because we think that, I'm not even going to look. I'm not even going to be interested. I don't even want to be tempted to think because I can't do anything about it. I think I was crying for the ones that don't know, who don't understand and maybe don't know or aren't engaged to know that the enemy is knocking on the door and we have solutions, but we can't apply the solutions if we don't know the problem. I think that's where the tears were coming from. So that time was very powerful. It woke me up. It challenged me. Am I thinking about a generation, or am I only thinking about my own? And as I shared with a few friends what God was doing in my heart, what he was showing me, and just even the canceled event, I was met with, do you think you should be going to that? Are you really thinking about what you're doing? Are you praying? Are you scared? And it was so interesting because as friends sort of challenged me, what they were really saying is, Suzanne, you've been doing this a long time, but are you counting the cost right now? Like, are you counting the cost? And guess what? That's what good friends do. They challenge you and they ask you those questions, and that's great counsel. And I think, yes, I do count the cost, but at this moment in time, I don't think I've ever had to count the cost where the price tag included a threat of death. I literally had to answer the question, are you willing to be a part of this, right? Sacrificially, are you willing to be a part of this conference when the threat of death is on the table? And my answer was yes, because the answer wasn't about me. It honestly wasn't about me. It was about what world am I and will I be leaving for my children and grandchildren, and therefore for a generation? That was the question, and that's what the answer had to be attached to. Okay, so as I thought about, here's some of the things that come to my mind. Okay, Sharia law is being discussed on a fairly regular basis at this point. I mean, what in the world? In a million years, why would we think that would be part of a common conversation right now in America? But it is. And then the thought comes, not my granddaughter. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. I'll go. Then we have not just Sharia law, but what about watching families that are being destroyed by social media and the threats of social media? That has not happened in my family. It doesn't matter. I'm watching other families, and it could be mine. Not the point. They're God's children. Not on my watch. What about the 1 in 10 children that are sexually abused or sexually harassed in a public school setting from faculty or teachers? That is a stat. Not on my watch. What about the families that are being destroyed because of really bad advice for parenting that does not set up for a strong family? These things not on my watch. And I'm inviting you all to look at the things that we're going to talk about and say not on my watch before it gets to your doorstep. Okay, as I was processing all of this, I'm going to tell you one more quick story. I had just a memory. I haven't thought about this in years, but I was probably in high school. I'm sure I was in high school. And I think it was over a holiday. I was in the kitchen. I can literally remember what drawer I was leaning against, where I was standing in my parents' kitchen. My dad and my mom were in the kitchen. My grandmother was in the kitchen. I think one of my sisters was in the kitchen. And I want to preface this by saying we did not talk about politics in my family. We didn't talk about politics or religion in my family. This wasn't something, I knew where my parents stood probably, but we weren't sitting around the table having conversations. So this was a unique conversation that was unfolding in front of me. And I don't know if there was an election that had just happened or coming up. Don't remember the details. I just remember the moment. And my dad was talking about a policy, something that was going to be happening. And this was the first moment that I realized my parents and my grandparents were not voting the same and were not seeing the world the same way, which was interesting. It did not cause us to cancel one another. It did not cause a break in the family. It was uncomfortable. It was interesting, but we went on with our holiday, right? It wasn't doing what it's doing now, but there was a bit of tension happening. And as the daughter and the granddaughter, I was standing there, and my dad was talking about this policy. My grandmother was pushing back on it. And my father challenged and said, this is what will happen in the coming generations if this policy goes into place. And I vividly remember my grandmother responding by saying, she was older at the time, but she said, well, I'll be dead. That's not going to impact me. And as a granddaughter, I thought, first of all, not my grandmother's finest moment, but I'm going to back that up with some statistics in a few minutes. Not the best moment, but I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, it might not even impact my dad, but what my dad's saying is that there's something that's going to impact this one right here, the third generation. And we're not thinking about the third generation. And it just kind of rolled off her tongue so easily. I think maybe that is what I'm sensing as we go into this season. We have to be thinking about that next generation because we're going to leave something behind. And if we're going to wait for it to come to our doorstep, we're going to wait until it gets into our house, we're going to have a harder time fighting it because it's already there. We have to see what's coming. Now, I want to share this statistic with you because it's super interesting. I just learned it. Did you know that 1 in 10 Americans has a generative view of life? Let me tell you what that means. 1 in 10 Americans are thinking about life 30 years out. Let me put it even more clearly. 1 in 10 Americans is literally thinking about the next generation. That is a statistic that is current right now. Why is that important? Because that's not Jesus. That's not Jesus. My grandmother was just one of the 9 in that moment. I don't know that she thought about that across the board, or maybe she was just annoyed at my father. But she was one in the 9. Are you one of the ones that's thinking about the next generation? Because Jesus thought about the next generation. He left his comfort and convenience. He was in heaven and came down, right, to show us what it means to go before and to be in front of us and to lead out and to be counterculture and to say the hard things and to do the hard things for the sake of those who would follow him, for the sake of those who would carry his message, for the sake of those who would carry his life and share his life with other people. That's where we are culturally. We are in a post-Christian culture right now. We have churches that won't speak about what's actually happening culturally that's impacting our kids. And those who are growing. The churches who will talk about what's actually happening in culture are the churches who are growing. I'm really calling you forward in this whole season to walk through these conversations that we're going to have with that kind of perspective. If what this person who's being interviewed is true, how is that going to impact not just my children and my grandchildren, but the generation? What are we leaving behind? Because what we leave behind is what we send forward. That's what a legacy is. So I'm inviting you to lean in with me. We're going to have some challenging conversations. You're going to hear some problems. Some of them are kind of weighty. But we're not going to leave you there because we're going to offer some solutions. We're going to share with you great frameworks. We're going to share with you really tangible solutions. We're going to share with you a couple of products that are amazing for families. We won't be interested in them if we won't look at the problem. And God in us is saying, hey, let's look at the problem because I'm the answer. So I'm inviting you to come with me on the journey into some of the hard things for the great solutions. I know that this season is going to help you. It's going to help you parent with purpose. It's going to help you disciple with direction. And it's going to, because we're going to be thinking about it from this lens, it's going to help you leave an intentional legacy. So let's lean in and let's be informed.